The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as 8-year-old Princess Alina clutched her golden practice crown tightly in her small hands. Today was supposed to be the most exciting day of her young life, the annual royal children's ceremony, where she would officially receive her first real crown from the queen herself. Alina had been preparing for this moment for months. Every morning she practiced walking with perfect posture while balancing books on her head. She memorized all the proper responses she would need to give during the ceremony. Most importantly, she had been practicing with this special golden crown that her grandmother, the former queen, had worn as a child 50 years ago. The crown wasn't made of real gold or precious stones like the adult royal crowns. It was crafted from polished brass with carefully placed crystals that sparkled beautifully in the sunlight. But to Alina, it was the most precious thing in the entire world. It represented everything she dreamed of becoming, a wise and kind ruler who would help her people. As Alina walked through the palace gardens practicing her ceremonial steps, she noticed a commotion near the main gates. A crowd had gathered to watch the early morning preparations for the ceremony. Vendors were setting up colorful stalls selling flowers and small flags. Musicians were tuning their instruments. Children from the nearby village had come with their families to catch a glimpse of the royal celebration. Alina loved seeing happy faces in the crowd. She waved at a group of children who were pointing at her crown and whispering excitedly to each other. Their joy made her feel proud and nervous. At the same time, soon she would officially be their princess, responsible for helping to take care of them and their families. But not everyone in the crowd was there to celebrate. Hidden among the cheerful families and excited vendors was a man whose presence seemed to darken everything around him. Marcus Thompson was 35 years old, tall and thin, with deep lines around his eyes that made him look much older. His clothes were clean but worn, and his hands shook slightly as he watched the preparations with growing desperation. Marcus had once been a successful merchant with a thriving business, selling fine fabrics to wealthy families throughout the kingdom. He owned a beautiful shop in the capital city, employed 12 workers, and lived in a comfortable house with his wife Sarah and their 6-year-old son Tommy. Life had been good, predictable, and full of hope for the future. But everything had changed 6 months ago when Tommy became seriously ill. The boy developed a rare condition that caused severe pain in his joints and made it difficult for him to walk or even sleep peacefully. The local doctors tried every treatment they knew, but nothing seemed to help. Tommy's condition only grew worse with each passing week. Desperate to save his son, Marcus had spent every penny he owned seeking treatments from specialists in distant cities. He sold his shop, his house, and even his wife's jewelry to pay for expensive medicines and consultations with famous healers. When the money ran out, he borrowed heavily from dangerous people who charged impossible interest rates. Despite all his efforts and sacrifices, Tommy continued to suffer. The specialists had finally given Marcus the devastating news that his son needed an extremely expensive treatment, available only in a foreign kingdom far across the sea. The cost was more money than Marcus could earn in 10 lifetimes, even if he had his business back. Now Marcus found himself in an impossible situation. He owed large amounts of money to violent criminals who had threatened to hurt his family if he didn't pay them back soon. His son was dying slowly and painfully. Wife Sarah spent every day crying and begging him to find a way to save their child. And Marcus had no legal way to get the money he desperately needed. That's when Marcus heard rumors about the priceless royal crown collection. According to the stories whispered in dark taverns where desperate men gathered, even one small piece from the royal treasury could be sold for enough money to solve any financial problem. The rumors claimed that some items were so valuable they could buy entire villages. Marcus knew that stealing from the royal family was punishable by death. He knew it was wrong to take something that didn't belong to him. He had never committed a crime in his life and had always been an honest, hard-working man who treated his customers fairly and paid his workers well. But watching his son suffer in agony every single day had pushed Marcus beyond rational thinking. When a person you love more than life itself is in terrible pain, moral boundaries begin to blur. The difference between right and wrong becomes less important than the difference between hope and despair. As Marcus watched Princess Elena walking through the gardens with her sparkling crown, a dark plan began forming in his mind. The crown looked small and light, easy for a desperate man to grab quickly and disappear into the crowd before anyone could stop him. If the rumors about royal treasures were true, selling that single crown might provide enough money to save Tommy's life. Marcus told himself that he would only borrow the crown, not really steal it. Once Tommy was healthy and he could work again, he would somehow find a way to return it or pay the royal family back. He convinced himself that the princess had many crowns and wouldn't really miss this one. He reasoned that a child's life was more important than a piece of jewelry, no matter how precious. These thoughts swirled through Marcus's mind as he moved closer to where Princess Elena was practicing her ceremonial walk. His hands were sweating and his heart was beating so fast he thought people around him might hear it. He had never felt so frightened and desperate in his entire life. Elena continued her practice, completely unaware of the dangerous man watching her every move. She was thinking about how proud her parents would be during the ceremony, how beautiful the decorations looked, and how excited she was to officially become a real princess. Her world was still filled with innocence, joy, and the assumption that everyone around her wished her well. The royal guards were stationed at various points throughout the palace grounds, but they were focused on watching for organized threats. Rather than paying attention to individual people in the crowd, they had no reason to suspect that a desperate father might be planning to commit the unthinkable crime of attacking a child. As the morning progressed and the ceremony time approached, Marcus's desperation reached a breaking point. He thought about Tommy lying in bed at home, moaning softly from pain that no 8-year-old should ever have to endure. He thought about Sarah's tears and her pleading eyes begging him to save their son. He thought about the violent men who would hurt his family if he couldn't pay his debts. Marcus made his decision. He would grab the crown and run, hoping to escape in the confusion before anyone could catch him. It was a terrible plan with almost no chance of success, but it was the only plan he had left. As Princess Elena walked past a group of excited children, waving and smiling at their enthusiasm, Marcus stepped forward from the crowd. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and his eyes held the wild look of a man who had nothing left to lose. What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. Marcus lunged forward suddenly, reaching toward Princess Elena with desperate hands. The 8-year-old princess had no time to react or understand what was happening. One moment she was waving at the crowd of children, and the next moment, a strange man was grabbing at her precious crown. "No!" Elena cried out, instinctively pulling back and trying to protect her crown. But Marcus was much stronger than the small child. His adult hands easily overpowered her tiny grip, and within seconds he had torn the golden crown from her head. The crowd erupted in chaos. People screamed and pointed at Marcus as he stood there holding the stolen crown, looking as shocked as everyone else by what he had just done. Children began crying. Women grabbed their own children protectively. Men shouted angrily and started moving toward Marcus with threatening gestures. Princess Elena fell backward from the force of Marcus's grab, landing hard on the stone pathway. Her ceremonial dress tore at the knee, and she scraped her small hands on the rough ground. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of having her most precious possession stolen right from her head. Tears streamed down Elena's face as she looked up at the man who had taken her crown. She didn't understand why anyone would want to hurt her or take something so important to her. In her 8 years of life, Elena had been surrounded by people who loved and protected her. This was her first real encounter with the cruel reality that some people in the world were willing to harm others to get what they wanted. "Please give it back," Elena whispered through her tears, her voice barely audible over the shouting crowd. "It was my grandmother's crown. Please, I need it for my ceremony today." Marcus heard her small, broken voice and felt his heart shatter into pieces. Looking down at the child he had just attacked, he saw his own son, Tommy. He saw innocence and pain and confusion in Elena's eyes. The same expression Tommy wore when he asked his father why he had to hurt so much. For a moment, Marcus almost handed the crown back. The sight of Elena's tears and scraped hands made him realize the full horror of what he had done. He had become the kind of person he had always despised, someone who would hurt a child to solve his own problems. But then, Marcus heard Tommy's voice in his memory, weak and filled with pain, asking Daddy, "When will the hurting stop?" He thought about his wife Sarah, who had stopped eating because she was so worried about their son. He remembered the doctor's words about Tommy having only weeks to live without. The expensive treatment. Marcus clutched the crown tighter and began pushing through the crowd, trying to escape before the guards could reach him. People grabbed at his clothes and tried to block his path, but his desperate strength allowed him to break free from their attempts to stop him. That's when. Was 52 years old and had served the royal family for over 20 years. He was known throughout the kingdom as a fair but firm man who always followed the law exactly as it was written. He had arrested thieves, murderers, and traitors without ever showing mercy or making exceptions. His duty was to protect the royal family, and he took that responsibility more seriously than his own life. When Captain Rodriguez saw Marcus running through the crowd with the stolen crown, this was exactly the kind of situation he had prepared for his entire career. A criminal had attacked a member of the royal family and stolen crown property. The law was crystal clear about what needed to happen next. "Stop right there, Captain," Rodriguez commanded in his powerful voice that had intimidated countless criminals over the years. "Drop the crown and surrender immediately." Marcus didn't stop. He couldn't stop. If he surrendered now, he would be executed for attacking the princess, and Tommy would die without ever getting the treatment that might save his life. Marcus had already crossed the line into criminality. There was no going back now. Captain Rodriguez drew his sword and began chasing Marcus through the crowded palace grounds. Other guards joined the pursuit, surrounding Marcus and cutting off his escape routes. Within minutes, the desperate father found himself cornered against the palace's outer wall, with nowhere left to run. "Please?" Marcus gasped, still holding Elena's crown against his chest. "You don't understand. My son is dying. I need this crown to save his life. I'll give it back. I promise I'll give it back. But please, let me save my boy first." Captain Rodriguez had heard every excuse imaginable from criminals trying to avoid punishment. Thieves always claimed they were stealing for noble reasons. Murderers always insisted their victims deserved to die. Traitors always argued they were actually patriots serving a higher cause. "The law doesn't care about your excuses, Captain," Rodriguez said coldly, pointing his sword at Marcus's chest. "You attacked Princess Elena and stole royal property. The punishment for that crime is death, and I'm going to carry out that punishment right now." The crowd had followed the chase and now formed a large circle around Marcus and Captain Rodriguez. Women covered their eyes. Men nodded grimly, believing that swift justice was the only way to handle such a serious crime. Princess Elena had also followed the crowd. Despite her scraped hands and torn dress, she pushed through the adults until she could see Marcus cornered against the wall, looking terrified and desperate. Elena asked in her small, clear voice that somehow carried over all the noise of the angry crowd. Marcus looked down at the little girl he had hurt. And for the first time since his son became ill, he told the complete truth about his situation. "Little boy is very sick," Marcus said, his voice breaking with emotion. "He's the same age as you, and he's in terrible pain every day. The doctors say he will die unless I can pay for special medicine from far away. I've lost everything trying to save him, and now bad men are going to hurt my family if I can't pay them back. I thought if I could sell your crown, I might have. Enough money to save my son's life?" The crowd grew quiet as Marcus spoke. Many of the people listening were parents themselves, and they began to understand the impossible situation that had driven this man to such desperate action. Elena listened carefully to Marcus's explanation. Even at 8 years old, she was intelligent, enough to understand that this man hadn't hurt her because he was evil or greedy. He had hurt her because he was trying to save someone he loved more than his own life. Captain Rodriguez raised his sword, preparing to end Marcus's life as the law required. But before he could strike, something happened that no one in the crowd expected. Princess Elena stepped between Captain Rodriguez and Marcus. spreading her small arms wide to protect the man who had stolen from her. "Wait," Alina said firmly, using the authoritative voice she had been practicing for her ceremony. Captain Rodriguez hesitated, confused by the child's intervention. In all his years of service, he had never seen a victim try to protect their attacker. He didn't know how to handle a situation where the person he was supposed to defend was defending the criminal. The entire crowd held their breath as Princess Alina stood between the sword and the desperate father. Her small body seemed impossibly fragile compared to the armed guards surrounding them, but her voice carried an authority that made even Captain Rodriguez pause. "Princess, please step aside," Captain Rodriguez said respectfully but firmly. "This man committed a serious crime against you. Justice must be served according to the law." Alina didn't move. Instead, she turned around to face Marcus directly, studying his tear-streaked face with the careful attention only children possess when trying to understand something important. "What's your son's name?" Alina asked quietly. Marcus was so surprised by the question that he almost forgot to answer. "Tommy," he whispered. "His name is Tommy, and he's 8 years old, just like you. Does Tommy like to play games?" Alina continued, ignoring the murmurs of confusion from the crowd around them. "He used to love running and climbing trees," Marcus replied, his voice growing softer as he thought about his son. "But now he can't even walk to the window without crying from pain. He spends all day in bed asking me when the hurting will stop." Alina nodded seriously, processing this information with the kind of deep empathy that adults often lose but children still possess naturally. She could imagine another 8-year-old child lying in bed, scared and hurting, waiting for his father to find a way to help him. "Captain Rodriguez," Alina said, turning back to the guard leader, but maintaining her protective position in front of Marcus. "If your son was dying and you had no money left to save him, what would you do?" Captain Rodriguez had expected many things from this confrontation, but philosophical questions from an 8-year-old princess were not among them. The question struck him deeply because he did have a son, a boy named Miguel, who was now grown and serving as a soldier in a distant province. "That's not relevant, Princess," Captain Rodriguez replied, though his voice had lost some of its harsh certainty. "The law exists to protect society from people who take things that don't belong to them. If we make exceptions for sob stories, criminals will always find excuses for their actions." But Alina wasn't satisfied with that answer. She had grown up in the palace listening to her parents discuss the complexities of ruling fairly and justly. She had heard countless conversations about the difference between following rules blindly and understanding why rules existed in the first place. "The crown belongs to me," Alina said clearly. "If it belongs to me, then I should get to decide what happens to the person who took it, right?" This logic created an impossible situation for Captain Rodriguez. The princess was technically correct as the victim of the crime. She had some legal authority over how justice was carried out. But no one had ever encountered a situation where an 8-year-old victim wanted to protect her attacker. Meanwhile, Akaska continued to stand against the wall, clutching Alina's crown and trying to understand why this child was defending him. In his desperate state, he had expected only anger and hatred from the people around him. The princess's compassion was so unexpected that it made him question everything he thought he knew about right and wrong. "Princess Alina," Marcus said quietly, "you don't owe me any kindness. I hurt you and took something precious from you. Captain Rodriguez is right. I deserve to be punished." Alina considered this for a moment, then asked another question that surprised everyone. "If I let Captain Rodriguez execute you right now, will that save your son Tommy?" Marcus shook his head sadly. "No. If I die, Tommy will die too. And my wife Sarah will be left alone with impossible debts and dangerous enemies. Then punishing you won't solve anything." Alina concluded with the clear logic that children often apply to adult problems. It will just create more sadness and more problems. The crowd began murmuring among themselves, divided between those who admired the princess's compassion and those who worried that mercy might encourage other desperate people to commit crimes. Captain Rodriguez found himself in the most difficult situation of his entire career. His duty was to enforce the law without exception, but the person he was supposed to protect was actively preventing him from doing his job. Moreover, the princess's questions had forced him to think about justice in ways that complicated his usual black-and-white understanding of right and wrong. "What do you propose we do instead?" Captain Rodriguez asked Alina, genuinely curious about her answer. Alina thought carefully before responding. At 8 years old, she didn't have extensive knowledge of legal procedures or criminal justice, but she had something potentially more valuable, a natural understanding of how to solve problems by addressing their root causes. "We should help." "Save Tommy," Alina announced. "If Tommy gets better, then Mr. Marcus won't need to steal from anyone anymore, and maybe he can find a way to make up for what he did wrong." The crowd's murmuring grew louder as people discussed this unprecedented suggestion. Some thought the princess was being naive, and that criminals would take advantage of such mercy. Others were moved by her wisdom and compassion, recognizing that she was proposing a solution that could actually prevent future crimes, rather than just punishing past ones. Marcus stared at Alina in amazement. This child, who had every right to hate him for what he had done, was instead proposing to help save his son's life. It was an act of forgiveness and generosity that Marcus had never witnessed from any adult, let alone from someone he had just attacked and robbed. Princess Marcus whispered, "Why would you want to help me after what I did to you?" Lana's answer was simple but profound. "Because helping you is the only way to make sure this never happens again. If I just let Captain Rodriguez hurt you, then Tommy will still be sick, your wife will still be sad, and maybe someday another daddy with a sick child will try to take something from someone else." This reasoning presented Captain Rodriguez with a dilemma that challenged everything he had been taught about law enforcement. Alina was essentially arguing that true justice required addressing the causes of crime rather than just punishing criminals after they acted. But there was still the matter of practical obstacles. Even if the princess's compassionate approach was morally superior, the royal treasury couldn't simply give money to every person with a sad story. There had to be some way to help Marcus without creating a precedent that would encourage others to commit crimes. Princess Elena. Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "Even if we wanted to help this man's son, do you understand how expensive medical treatments can be? The royal family has responsibilities to the entire kingdom, not just to individual people with personal problems." Alina nodded seriously. She had heard her parents discuss the royal budget many times and understood that even kings and queens couldn't solve every problem with money alone. But then Alina had an idea that would surprise everyone even more than her previous actions. "Captain Rodriguez," she said, "what if we don't use royal money to help Tommy? What if we ask the people in the kingdom to help instead?" This suggestion opened up possibilities that no one had considered before. Lena was proposing to turn Marcus's crime into an opportunity for the entire community to demonstrate compassion and solidarity. Elena's suggestion created a buzz of excitement throughout the crowd. The idea of turning this crisis into a community effort to save a sick child appealed to many people who had been watching the confrontation unfold. "You mean ask for donations?" Captain Rodriguez asked, trying to understand the princess's plan. "Not just donations," Alina replied, her young mind working through the possibilities. "What if everyone in the kingdom who wanted to help could contribute something? Rich people could give money, but other people could help in different ways. Maybe doctors could share their knowledge, or people with horses could help transport medicine, or cooks could make food for Tommy's family." The crowd began responding enthusiastically to this idea. Several people immediately stepped forward, reaching into their pockets and purses to offer whatever coins they had with them. A woman who had been selling flowers at the ceremony handed her entire day's earnings to Captain Rodriguez. An elderly man removed his gold wedding ring and offered it for the cause. "I'm a baker," called out a middle-aged man from the back of the crowd. "I could provide bread for the boy's family so they don't have to worry about food while he recovers." "My husband is a carpenter," shouted a woman holding a small child. "He could repair their house or build furniture they might need." "I know about herbs and healing," offered an elderly woman with kind eyes. "I could help take care of the boy while his parents rest." Within minutes, dozens of people were volunteering to contribute whatever they could to help save Tommy's life. The outpouring of generosity was so immediate and overwhelming that even Captain Rodriguez found himself moved by the community's response. Marcus watched in complete amazement as strangers offered to help his family. These were people who owed him nothing, people he had never met, people who had just witnessed him commit a serious crime. Yet they were willing to open their hearts and wallets to save his son simply because a compassionate child had asked them. "2. I don't understand," Marcus said to Alina, tears streaming down his face. "Why are all these people willing to help me after what I did?" Alina smiled at him with the pure wisdom that only children possess, because everyone here knows what it feels like to love someone so much that you'd do anything to protect them. "They're not helping you because you're a good person. They're helping you because they're good people." Captain Rodriguez realized that he was witnessing something extraordinary. In all his years of law enforcement, he had seen crime create nothing but pain, anger, and division. But Princess Alina had somehow transformed Marcus's desperate act into an opportunity for the entire community to demonstrate their best qualities. However, there were still practical problems to solve. Even with the community's generous response, organizing medical treatment in a foreign country would require official coordination and legal documentation. Marcus was still technically a criminal who had committed a serious offense against the royal family. Princess Alina, Captain Rodriguez said thoughtfully, "Your compassion is admirable, but we still need to address the legal aspects of this situation. The man still stole your crown, and there are procedures that must be followed." Alina considered this problem seriously. She understood that rules and laws existed for important reasons, and that simply ignoring crimes could lead to chaos and injustice. But she also believed that the purpose of justice should be to make things better, not just to punish people for making mistakes. "What if Mr. Marcus works to pay back the kingdom for what he did wrong?" Alina suggested. "He could help other families who have problems like his. He could teach people about how desperation can make good people do bad things. He could make sure this kind of situation doesn't happen to anyone else." This proposal intrigued Captain Rodriguez. Alina was essentially suggesting a form of restorative justice that would require Marcus to contribute positively to society rather than simply suffering punishment. It was an approach that could potentially prevent future crimes while helping Marcus rebuild his life in a constructive way. Marcus immediately grasped the significance of Alina's offer. "Yes," he said eagerly, "I could do that. I could work with other families facing medical crises. I could help them find legal ways to get the help they need before they become as desperate as I did." The crowd murmured approvingly at this suggestion. Many people could see the wisdom in turning Marcus's terrible experience into something that might prevent other parents from facing similar impossible choices. But Captain Rodriguez still had concerns about setting a precedent that might encourage other criminals to expect mercy. "Princess, what happens when word spreads throughout the kingdom that attacking royal family members results in community fundraisers rather than executions? Won't that encourage other desperate people to commit crimes?" Alina thought about this question carefully. It was a complex issue that even experienced judges and lawmakers struggled with. How do you show mercy without encouraging lawlessness? How do you address the root causes of crime without appearing to reward criminal behavior? "Captain Rodriguez," Alina said finally, "I think people will learn the right lesson from this story. They'll learn that our kingdom is the kind of place where people help each other when someone is in trouble. They'll learn that they don't have to choose between breaking the law and watching their loved ones suffer." Alina's words resonated with many people in the crowd. She was articulating a vision of justice that focused on preventing problems rather than just punishing them after they occurred. Captain Rodriguez found himself genuinely impressed by the princess's reasoning. In just a few minutes, this 8-year-old child had proposed a comprehensive approach to criminal justice that addressed punishment, prevention, rehabilitation, and community healing all at once. "There's still the matter of the crown itself," Captain Rodriguez pointed out. "It's a valuable royal artifact that was stolen from you." Alina looked at the golden crown still clutched in Marcus's hands. It sparkled beautifully in the afternoon sunlight, and she knew it would look perfect during her ceremony later that day. But she also knew that the crown's greatest value now lay in what it represented, proof that compassion and wisdom could transform even the worst situations into opportunities for goodness. "Mr. Marcus," Alina said, "I want you to give me back my crown now." Marcus immediately handed the crown to Alina, his hands shaking as he realized the full magnitude of what she was offering him. "Princess, I don't know how to thank you for this kindness. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your help." Alina placed the crown back on her head, where it belonged, but her expression remained serious and thoughtful. "Mr. Marcus, you're right that you don't deserve help just because you stole from me. But Tommy deserves help because he's a sick little boy who needs medicine. All these people deserve the chance to show how caring they are. Sometimes good things can come from bad situations if people choose to make them good." The crowd erupted in applause at Elena's words. Her wisdom and compassion had turned what could have been a tragic day into something inspiring and hopeful. Captain Rodriguez realized that he had just witnessed something that would change how he thought about justice for the rest of his career. An 8-year-old princess had demonstrated that true strength sometimes meant choosing mercy over vengeance, and that the most effective way to prevent crime was to address its underlying causes. "Very well," Captain Rodriguez announced to the crowd. "By order of Princess Alina, Marcus Thompson will not be executed for his crimes. Instead, he will be given the opportunity to work with community organizations to help other families facing medical crises. The people of our kingdom have volunteered to help save his son's life, and in return, he will dedicate his life to preventing other parents from facing such desperate circumstances." The crowd cheered this decision, feeling proud to be part of a kingdom that could respond to crisis with compassion rather than just punishment. But the most important reaction came from a small voice in the crowd, a voice that had been quiet throughout the entire confrontation. The small voice belonged to a woman who had been standing quietly at the edge of the crowd throughout the entire confrontation. Sarah Thompson, Marcus's wife, had followed her husband to the palace that morning because she was terrified of what desperate act he might attempt. "Marcus," Sarah called out, pushing through the crowd with tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, what have you done?" When Marcus saw his wife approaching, the full weight of his actions finally hit him. Sarah looked exhausted and frightened, her clothes worn from weeks of sitting beside Tommy's bedside, her face pale from worry and lack of sleep. The sight of her made Marcus realize how close he had come to destroying not just his own life, but hers as well. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," Marcus said, reaching out to embrace his wife. "I almost ruined everything. Almost left you and Tommy alone forever." Sarah held her husband tightly, understanding better than anyone else the impossible desperation that had driven him to such extreme action. "I was so scared," she whispered. "When I woke up and found you gone, I knew you were planning something dangerous. I couldn't bear the thought of losing both you and Tommy." Princess Alina watched the reunion between Marcus and Sarah with deep empathy. Even at 8 years old, she could recognize the profound love and fear in their embrace. These were parents who had been pushed to the breaking point by circumstances beyond their control. "Mrs. Thompson," Alina said gently, approaching the couple with her crown now securely back on her head, "is Tommy feeling today?" Sarah looked at the princess with surprise and gratitude. Despite everything that had happened, this child was showing genuine concern for her sick son. "He's having a very bad day, Your Highness," Sarah replied. "The pain is worse when the weather changes, and he couldn't sleep at all last night." Elena's heart ached for the suffering family. She had never experienced serious illness herself, but she had a powerful imagination that allowed her to understand how terrifying it must be to watch someone you love suffer without being able to help them. "Would you like me to visit Tommy?" Alina asked. "Sometimes when I'm sad or scared, it helps to have a friend to talk to." This offer surprised everyone, including Captain Rodriguez. It was highly unusual for members of the royal family to visit the homes of common citizens, especially the homes of people who had just committed crimes against them. "Princess," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "I'm not sure that's advisable from a security standpoint." But Alina had already made up her mind. "Captain Rodriguez, if we're really going to help this family, then we need to understand what they're going through. I can't help Tommy if I don't know what he needs." Sarah looked at Alina with amazement and gratitude. "Your Highness, you would really want to visit our son, after what Marcus did to you." "Mrs. Thompson," Alina replied with the simple honesty that defined her character, "your husband didn't hurt me because he's a bad person. He hurt me because he loves Tommy so much that he was willing to risk everything to save him. I think that kind of love is something worth helping, not something worth punishing." The crowd murmured approvingly at Elena's words. Many parents in the group were deeply moved by her understanding of family love and sacrifice. Within an hour, a remarkable procession formed through the streets of the capital city. Princess Elena, still wearing her golden crown, walked alongside Marcus and Sarah Thompson toward their modest home. Captain Rodriguez and several guards provided security. But their usual stern expressions had been replaced by curiosity and admiration for the princess's compassionate leadership. Following behind them came dozens of citizens carrying donations, supplies, and offers of help. The baker brought fresh bread and pastries. The carpenter carried tools to repair any problems with the Thompsons' house. The herb woman brought natural remedies that might help ease Tommy's pain. Children carried flowers and drawings to cheer up the sick boy. When they arrived at the Thompsons' small house, Lena could immediately see the signs of a family in crisis. The building needed repairs that Marcus couldn't afford to make. The garden was overgrown because no one had time to tend it while caring for Tommy. Through the windows, they could see rooms that had been emptied of furniture sold to pay for medical expenses. But none of these external problems mattered to Elena when she first saw Tommy Thompson. The 8-year-old boy was lying in a simple bed, his face pale and drawn from months of constant pain. His legs were covered with blankets, but Elena could see how thin he had become from his illness. Despite his suffering, Tommy's eyes lit up with curiosity when he saw the princess entering his room. "Mama," Tommy whispered to Sarah, "why is there a princess in our house?" Elena approached Tommy's bed carefully, not wanting to cause him any additional discomfort. She had never been around seriously ill children before, but her natural empathy guided her behavior. "Hi, Tommy," Elena said softly. "My name is Elena, and I came to visit you because I heard you haven't been feeling very well." Tommy stared at Elena's crown with wide eyes. "Are you a real princess?" "I am," Elena replied. "And this is my special crown that my grandmother wore when she was a little girl like us." "It's beautiful," Tommy said weakly, but then his expression grew sad. "I'm sorry my daddy tried to take it from you. He's not really a bad person. He just gets scared when I hurt too much." Elena felt her heart breaking for this brave little boy who was apologizing for his father's actions while dealing with his own terrible pain. She sat down carefully on the edge of Tommy's bed, making sure not to disturb him. "Tommy, your daddy loves you very much," Elena said gently. "Sometimes when people love someone as much as he loves you, they make mistakes because they're so worried and scared. But you know what? A whole bunch of people in our kingdom want to help make you feel better." As if to prove her point, the room began filling with the citizens who had followed them from the palace. Each person approached Tommy's bed with gifts, kind words, and offers of assistance. The sick boy's eyes grew wider with each new visitor. Unable to believe that so many strangers cared about his welfare, the herb woman, whose name was Margaret, sat beside Tommy and gently examined his swollen joints. "I've been studying healing plants for 40 years, she told him kindly. "I think I know some teas and poultices that might help you feel more comfortable while we work on getting you the special medicine you need." The baker, a jolly man named Robert, placed a basket of sweet pastries on Tommy's bedside table. "My own grandson loves these honey cakes," he said. "It might not cure your illness, but they'll certainly make you smile." One by one, each visitor contributed something meaningful to Tommy's care. The carpenter began immediately repairing loose floorboards, made walking difficult for Sarah. Several women organized a schedule to help with cooking and cleaning, so Sarah could focus entirely on Tommy's care. Young people volunteered to sit with Tommy during his worst pain episodes so his parents could rest. But the most important contribution came from Dr. Harrison, an elderly physician who had been practicing medicine for over 30 years. He had heard about the situation and hurried to the Thompson house to examine Tommy personally. After a thorough examination, Dr. Harrison confirmed what the other doctors had told Marcus and Sarah. Tommy's condition was indeed serious and would require the expensive foreign treatment to fully cure. However, Dr. Harrison had additional knowledge that provided new hope. "I have a colleague who studied this exact condition in the foreign kingdom you mentioned," Dr. Harrison told the gathered crowd. "He returned to our kingdom last year and has been quietly treating similar cases with great success." The treatment is still expensive, but it's available much closer to home than you thought. This news changed everything. Instead of needing enough money to travel across the sea and pay foreign doctors, Tommy could potentially receive treatment right in their own kingdom. The amount needed was still substantial, but it was within reach of what the community had already volunteered to provide. Marcus collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. For months, he had believed that saving his son's life was impossible without committing crimes or borrowing from dangerous people. Now, thanks to Princess Elena's compassion and the community's generosity, a solution was within reach through entirely legal and honorable means. "Dr. Harrison," Sarah asked with trembling voice, "how long would the treatment take? Would Tommy need to stay in a hospital far from home?" "The treatment takes about 3 months," Dr. Harrison replied. "Tommy would need to stay at my colleague's medical facility, but it's only a day's journey from here. You could visit him regularly and be involved in his care throughout the process." Tommy, who had been listening to all of this with the intense focus that sick children develop, spoke up in his weak but determined voice. "Mama, Papa, does this mean I might be able to run and climb trees again?" The hope in Tommy's question brought tears to everyone's eyes. This brave little boy had endured months of pain and limitation, but he had never stopped dreaming about the day when he might feel healthy and strong again. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, stroking Tommy's hair. "If the treatment works the way Dr. Harrison says it will, you'll be able to do all the things you used to love." Princess Elena had been quietly watching the reunification of hope in the Thompson family. Seeing Tommy's shy smile and hearing his parents' relieved laughter made her feel prouder than any crown or ceremony ever could. "Tommy," Elena said, "would you like to be my special friend? When you're feeling better, maybe you could visit the palace and see all the gardens and meet the horses." Tommy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? I could visit a real palace?" "Of course," Elena replied. "And maybe you could help me with some of my princess duties. I think you're brave enough to be an honorary palace advisor." The room filled with laughter and happy tears as everyone contemplated the bright future that now seemed possible for Tommy and his family. Captain Rodriguez, who had been observing everything in amazement, realized that he had witnessed something that would change his understanding of justice forever. Princess Elena had demonstrated that the most effective way to prevent crime was not through harsh punishment, but through addressing the desperation and hopelessness that drove good people to make terrible choices. As the afternoon wore on, and the community continued organizing Tommy's care and treatment, Marcus pulled Princess Elena aside for a private conversation. "Your Highness," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion, "I need you to know that what you did today saved more than just Tommy's life. You saved my soul. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone willing to hurt innocent people to solve my problems. Your forgiveness showed me that there's always a better way, even when everything seems hopeless." Elena looked at Marcus with the wisdom that had surprised everyone that day. "Mr. Marcus, I think you were always a good person. You just forgot. For a little while because you were so scared and sad, but now you remember again, and you can help other people remember too." 6 months later, the kingdom had never been the same. The story of Princess Elena's compassion and wisdom had spread far beyond their borders, inspiring similar acts of mercy and community support throughout neighboring lands. Tommy Thompson was running through the palace gardens, his laughter echoing off the ancient stone walls as he chased butterflies with Princess Elena. The experimental treatment had worked even better than Dr. Harrison had hoped. Not only was Tommy completely cured of his painful condition, but he had grown stronger and healthier than he had ever been before his illness. "Elena, look," Tommy called out, pointing to a beautiful blue butterfly that had landed on his outstretched finger. "It's not afraid of me anymore." Princess Elena smiled as she watched her friend's joy. Tommy visited the palace twice a week now, serving as her official chief advisor on helping people, a title she had created specifically for him. His insights into what it felt like to suffer and need help had proven invaluable in shaping new kingdom policies. Marcus Thompson had become the director of the kingdom's first Family Crisis Prevention Center, a revolutionary program that provided support to families facing medical, financial, or other emergencies before they became desperate enough to consider illegal actions. The center was funded entirely through voluntary community contributions, and its success had exceeded everyone's expectations. In his new role, Marcus worked with families throughout the kingdom, helping them navigate complex medical systems, find financial assistance, and connect with community resources. His personal experience with desperation made him uniquely qualified to understand and help other parents facing similar impossible choices. "We've helped over 300 families this year," Marcus told Princess Elena during one of his regular reports, "and not a single one of them has turned to crime to solve their problems. When people have hope and support, they make better choices." Sarah Thompson had also found new purpose in the aftermath of that dramatic day. She had become the center's coordinator for medical support, working with Dr. Harrison and other physicians to ensure that no child in the kingdom went without necessary treatment due to their family's financial situation. The community fundraising model that had saved Tommy's life had become a permanent part of kingdom culture. Citizens regularly contributed to a compassion fund that helped families in crisis, and the fund had grown so large that it could handle multiple emergencies simultaneously. Captain Rodriguez had undergone his own transformation following the events of that memorable day. He had worked with Princess Elena to develop new training programs for the Royal Guard that emphasized understanding the root causes of crime rather than simply responding to criminal acts with force. A good guard protects people not just from criminals, but from the desperation that creates criminals in the first place. Captain Rodriguez now taught new recruits. His approach had become a model for law enforcement throughout the region. Most remarkable change, however, was in how the kingdom's citizens viewed justice and mercy. Elena's actions had demonstrated that showing compassion to wrongdoers didn't weaken society. It strengthened it by addressing problems before they festered into bigger crises. On the anniversary of the Crown incident, Princess Elena stood before a crowd of thousands gathered in the same palace courtyard where everything had begun. She was now 9 years old, wearing the same golden crown that had been at the center of the crisis. But her demeanor carried a wisdom that impressed adults. Throughout the kingdom, 1 year ago, something happened in this courtyard that taught all of us an important lesson. Elena addressed the crowd. "We learned that when people do bad things, it doesn't always mean they are bad people. Sometimes it means they need help. And when we help them, instead of just punishing them, amazing things can happen." In the crowd, Marcus, Sarah, and Tommy Thompson stood together, healthy and happy, living proof of Elena's philosophy. Tommy wore a small silver crown that Elena had given him, a symbol of his honorary position as her advisor and friend. Elena continued, smiling at her friend in the audience, "Taught me that being brave doesn't mean you don't hurt. It means you keep hoping and trying, even when everything seems hopeless. And his parents taught me that love sometimes makes people do scary things, but love also makes people do beautiful things." The crowd erupted in applause as Elena gestured toward the Thompson family. Their story had become legendary throughout the kingdom, inspiring countless acts of compassion and community support. Elena raised her hand for quiet and continued her speech. "Today I want to announce something special. Our kingdom is starting a new tradition. Every year on this day, we will celebrate Compassion Day by looking for people in our community who need help and working together to solve their problems before they become too big to handle." The announcement was met with enthusiastic cheering. Citizens immediately began discussing neighbors and friends who might benefit from community support and organizing committees to coordinate assistance. But Elena wasn't finished with her surprises. "Tommy Thompson," Elena called out, "would you please come up here?" Tommy made his way through the crowd, no longer the pale, weak child who had lain suffering in bed a year ago. He was now a healthy, energetic boy whose experience with illness had given him extraordinary empathy for others who were struggling.
"Tommy,"
Elena said as he joined her on the platform, "you've been my advisor for 6 months now, and you've helped me understand so many things about how to help people. I think it's time for you to have a real job in the kingdom government." Elena reached into a ceremonial box and withdrew an official document signed by the Queen herself. "Tommy Thompson," Elena announced, I hereby appoint you as the kingdom's first minister of compassion. Your job will be to make sure that no family in our kingdom ever feels as hopeless and desperate as your family felt last year." Tommy stared at the document in amazement. At 9 years old, he was being given an official government position with real authority to help people. It was beyond anything he had ever dreamed possible. "Princess Alina," Tommy said with the serious tone he had developed during his months as her advisor, "I promise to work every day to make sure that no other kid has to watch their parents cry because they don't know how to get help." The crowd's emotional response to Tommy's promise was overwhelming. Many people were crying as they realized the profound transformation that had occurred in their kingdom over the past year. Marcus stepped forward from the crowd and addressed Princess Elena directly. "Your Highness, I want everyone here to know that exactly 1 year ago, I was planning to steal your crown and probably spend the rest of my life running from the law. Instead, you gave me the chance to become someone I'm proud to be. You've saved my son's life, my family's future, and my own soul." Elena's response embodied the wisdom that had guided her actions from the beginning. "Mr. Marcus, I didn't save you. You saved yourself by choosing to become the person you really wanted to be. I just gave you the chance to make that choice." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Alina reflected on everything that had changed since that frightening morning when a desperate man had grabbed her crown. She had learned that real strength came not from wearing crowns or giving orders, but from understanding people's pain and finding ways to heal it. The golden crown still sat on her head, sparkling in the afternoon sunlight, but Alina knew now that its true value had nothing to do with gold or jewels. Its value lay in what it represented: the responsibility to use power and privilege to lift others up, rather than to protect oneself from their problems. Tommy ran up too, Lena as the crowd was leaving, his face glowing with excitement about his new official position. "Lena, I have an idea for our first Compassion Day project. There's a family in my old neighborhood whose house burned down last month, and they're living in a barn because they can't afford to rebuild." Alina smiled at her friend's enthusiasm and compassion. "That sounds like exactly the kind of problem we should solve together. Let's start planning tomorrow." As Princess Alina and Minister Tommy walked back toward the palace, discussing their plans to help the displaced family, the kingdom's citizens began organizing the first annual Compassion Day celebration. What had started as one man's desperate crime had become an entire society's commitment to ensuring that desperation never again drove good people to make terrible choices. The crown incident had taught everyone involved that mercy was not weakness, but the strongest foundation upon which to build true justice. And in a kingdom where compassion had become official policy, everyone could wear their own invisible crown of dignity, knowing that their community would never abandon them in their darkest hour.